Welcome to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch, Chief Editor at Smart Publishing, and this is the podcast where we explore all things writing, publishing, and the impact of storytelling. In each episode, I'll share insights and strategies to help you navigate the book journey, whether you're writing, publishing, or already an author. Plus, you'll hear from inspiring authors who are using their book to change lives. And if you're passionate about storytelling and ready to make an impact, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Now let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch, your host and Chief Editor at Smart Publishing, and I am back after a week off due to the Thanksgiving holiday here in the U.S. I just took the whole week. Thanksgiving, if you are not in the U.S. and are not familiar with it, it is always on a Thursday, which is also the day when my podcast episodes are released. So I just forewent having a podcast last week and took the time, and it was nice. Now I'm dusting my brain off and getting back in the driver's seat. And I was thinking about possible topics for today. I've been thinking about it for a few days now, and I keep thinking, gosh, I've really talked about everything at length. Occasionally, I'll go on Facebook and make a post and be like, hey, guys, what should I talk about? And we get some great recommendations. Unfortunately, the great recommendations are recommendations for episodes that I've already done. And so I don't want this podcast to become something where I'm repeating myself. And so I think we have to start digging into the meat of things with some examples now. And so for that reason, I am going to have several episodes, including this one, be part of a case study series so that we can go from talking about concepts to application and how you do things. And so this episode, it's episode 42. I am calling it Planning a Book, and it's case study number 1. And what we're going to do is we are going to work through a specific use case, and I'm going to take you through the process for how you should ideally plan the structure of your book so that you can get a feel for what that process looks like in action. And then you can hopefully go and apply it if you have been one of those folks who wants to write a book but has been stuck at the how do I get started phase. I will say that everything that I'm going to discuss is discussed at length in my book, The 1 Hour Author, a simple guide to writing and publishing on a busy schedule, which is available on both Audible and Amazon. So if you do not have that book, definitely go get it. I highly recommend that you get one of the print versions. So it's available in hardcover and paperback, because I made it like a workbook for you to essentially have sections where you're filling out your thoughts as you're working your way through the book so that it becomes your plan for writing your book. And after it's written, publishing your book, marketing for your launch, and then marketing post-launch. So it's a really, really handy book for any author to have, and especially those of you who are busy people and don't have a lot of time to write a book, but see the value in it, because it will let you know our strategy and how you can write a book in as little as 1 hour per week. And as I've said before, if you're doing audio recording, that's even as short as 20 to 40 minutes a week once you get your plan off the ground. So we're going to start at the planning phase, because the planning phase is the most important part of writing a book. Writing your book is not the most important part of writing your book, actually. It's planning your book. And here's why I say that. If there's no plan and you end up spending a bunch of time writing a book that's poorly planned, poorly put together because there was no plan, you wasted a lot of time, and it's probably not going to be very successful. And so that's why the planning phase is so important, and why I encourage people to spend a good amount of time in that phase. Do not rush through it, because if you rush through it, the quality of your planning is going to dictate the quality of your end product. So typically, if I have an author who doesn't have their concept nailed down yet, I will start at the very, very beginning. And by beginning, I actually mean the end. And what I mean by that is something called backwards design. And it's how I approach everything. I approach everything with a goal or a result that I want to achieve in mind, because there's been plenty of authors who have written books where they're like, I just felt passionate about this, but they get to the end and they're like, I have no idea what to do with this now. Well, it's because you didn't start with the end in mind. So we need to reverse engineer this or backward design this. So, since we're doing a case study, let's go ahead and present our case study as something that would be easy for me to talk about, because I've gotten questions on it before. It's not a book that I've written. It's probably not a book I will write. I don't know. Maybe I'll write it one day. But so before I got into publishing, I had a very successful career in the corporate world, climbed all the way to the top of where I wanted to be, in a C-level position. And I get a lot of questions from people around, as a minority female, I'm Hispanic. If you can't, see me because you're listening to this, um, as a minority female, how did you do that? Um, and so let's take that as a case study, because that's something that is easy for me to talk about. I will say it's not something I've ever thought too in depth about how I would create a book on it before being right here on the spot with you. So I'm putting myself on the spot. I have not prepared any of this because I want you to truly get a sense for what the process is like and how you have to think through the process. So let's start at number one. If I were the person who were to write this book, what is my purpose for writing this book? I have to get that clear first. Now, here are some ideas of what my purpose for writing the book could be. I could purely just be a very generous person with my time and my resources, and have more of a goal of just inspiring other women, and being an inspiration, being motivational, helping other women. I don't care what I get back from this. I just want to inspire and help others. That is a perfectly okay reason for writing a book. I would say if that is your primary reason for writing a book, though, just know that if at a later point you're wanting to utilize it in a certain way, like getting speaking engagements, for example, you may need to go back and reverse engineer some things. So really think through, is that truly only your primary reason, or potentially might you want to do something in the future with this? And I like to say primary reason because I had multiple reasons for writing my first book, Leading Through Love, and that's totally fine, but you need a primary reason. My primary reason with that one was a corporate level branding book to brand myself as a leader within the learning and development industry. And it worked out really well. I had multiple opportunities come out as a product of that. I was looked at very differently as a leader within the learning and development industry. So it was something that, fortunately, since I had that end goal in mind, I was able to engineer it for that. Okay, so let's say that my primary goal, I'm like sitting around here, I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, you know what? I want to get speaking engagements. I want to get on podcasts to talk about this. I want to get in front of virtual audiences to talk about this, virtual live audiences being, a little bit different from a podcast. I want to get in front of some live audiences about this, in person. Okay, now I've got a really, really good idea of why I'm writing my book. Now, the next thing I need to think about as I'm writing my book is not just how am I going to structure it, but I need to think about how I am going to honor that primary reason for writing the book. So, if I want to get speaking engagements, that book, it would probably be better for me to audio record that book than it would be for me to write that book. And I'm a writer, okay? And so let me get into why. When someone is assessing you to be a speaker, or someone is reading your book from that standpoint, they are looking for something that feels like, oh, this could be a keynote, this could be a keynote speech, or this could be a really good 30-minute talk. And so if your book is written in a way to where it's like maybe more bulleted lists and lots of call out boxes and things like that, and it feels less like a sort of speaking narrative, then it's not going to be as much of a best helper for that purpose. So you need to make sure that people read that and they're like, oh my gosh, this chapter, this thing, I want you to come talk to my audience about that, just the way that you tell it in the book. So it needs to be very true to how you would be as a speaker. And you're going to do that a lot more easily if you audio record and then transcribe. So, something really important to think about before you structure your book, because it may change how you structure your book. Okay, so I know that my primary goal is speaking engagements. I know that the way I structure my book needs to feel more like a narrative, more like almost storytelling driven, something that would really engage an audience, right? And that helps me in my next step, which is structuring the book, starting to structure the book. And we're not going to get too much farther than this because this is just the planning the book phase. I won't go all the way through chapter mapping, not yet, at least. Okay, so I usually tell people who are writing about a specific topic that's both personal and has principle or lesson based things that can be extracted, that there's two ways for them to write that book. They can write it in a memoir or a story driven way where the primary pull or the primary structure is based off of events in their life, milestones, things that happened in their life. So it feels a little bit more what I have coined the term as an instructional memoir. So it's a memoir, but it's not just my story. You can learn and you can apply things from it. The other way that I tell them they can write it is like my first book, Leading Through Love. I told stories in that book. However, it was structured according to what leaders and managers have to do. So things like progressive coaching is a whole chapter. The employee leader relationship is a whole chapter. Those are literally the names of the chapter because I wanted to write it in a leadership or management discipline structure. So if I had been focused on speaking engagements with Leading Through Love, I would not have written it that way. I wrote it that way because, again, it was a branding book for me. And then it's very clear to anyone looking at that, oh, she really understands the leadership and management discipline step by step. And she can do all of these hard, tough things that leaders need to do in a productive and tactful way. That is not what you're trying to get across, though, with a speaking audience. You're not trying to essentially, up your value as a member of their executive team. It's a speaking audience. You're trying to engage them. That's the most important thing, as the audience wants to be really engaged in what you're talking about, and they want to learn something from it too. And so going back to my primary goal to get more speaking engagements and then staying true to the structure of that being story driven, it needs to feel like it would be a speech or a talk that I would give. That is what's going to drive me to say I am going to choose the story driven structure versus the more topic or concept driven structure. So let's just say I can go chronological. There's multiple ways you can go with storytelling. So I can start as a young girl, and then I can go into my adolescence, and then I can go into when I bought my first business, which happened before I went to school. Well, I kind of did a little bit of schooling. It wasn't very good, but I really worked a whole lot more before I got all my different degrees that I ended up getting much later in life in my 30s. Um, and so, I could go that route, but that's not the only route. I think that's the obvious route when you're doing something that's story driven, is just to go in order of the story. But another route that you can go is event driven. And you can even do what's called a Quentin Tarantino, which you can start at the end. So you could start the very first chapter with, you know, where you're at today. So I could start with, the birth of smart publishing, or, exiting, the corporate world. Or I could, start with more of a like milestone event for me. So maybe it was, when I was promoted into a manager of learning and development position for a very large international fitness organization. That was sort of a where the rubber meets the road moment. Or, another rubber meets the road moment was when I bought a coffee shop and cafe. I'd never worked at a coffee shop and cafe before. I did that when I was 19 years old, and it was a journey through the fire type of lesson and management and leadership and responsibility, because I'd never held a job down for more than 6 months when I did that. So there's a lot of different places you could start, but the point is, maybe you could choose something that, boom, immediately captures your audience and shows them the shift in your thinking, and then you can start to tell other parts of the story around that, as long as it's all culminating in a flow of the book that makes logical sense. Not everything has to be in sequence to make logical sense. Otherwise, again, Quentin Tarantino movies wouldn't necessarily make sense, because some of them really jump around. So you can play with it quite a bit, and you can be very creative with it. But what you want to make sure is that you have anywhere between, I would say, 8 to 12 chapters is a pretty good sweet spot. You want an introduction and you want a conclusion. So the introduction is meant to orient your reader before you jump into the story, so that they understand what the book is about, why you wrote it, who it's for, how it's structured, anything else you want them to know. And then your conclusion is essentially just taking all of like the major key points, like, hey, if you leave with nothing else from this book, this is what I want you to leave with. And throughout all of that, if I am writing my book with an intent to get more speaking engagements, I am going to write that in somewhere. So I might include a page specific to, booking me, or going to such and such website for more information. I'm open for speaking engagements, yada yada yada. Or I could even work in call to actions at the end of some of those chapters, with QR codes that the reader can scan, website addresses, whatever it may be. I think the QR code process is a little bit more slick. You just have to think that through and how you do that on a Kindle. So usually I'll do QR code and the web address, because if I'm reading a book on my phone, I can't scan my phone with my own phone. Okay, side rant aside, but those details matter for your readers, based off of multiple formats. So, there are multiple ways that you can work that in. And that's, again, another reason why it's so important for you to have figured out what your primary goal for writing the book is before you even plan or structure it. That's the very, very, very first step. And that's why, because then you can be very intentional about how you write your book and the elements that you put into your book to lead to what that end purpose and goal is. So, I'm going to I'm going to wrap things up from there, because like I said, I'm not going to go super deep into the chapter mapping process. We will get there in this series, but I just wanted to start this series, the first episode of this series, out with getting into how you think about what book you're going to write and why you're writing that book and how that leads into how you structure your book. When we come back next time, we'll get a little bit more into the structure of the book in the actual chapter mapping process. We'll get a little bit more into the first step of that, which is determining your chapters. So we will sort of finish what we just started here when I started talking about the different ways that you can map out your structure, chronological or event based. So we will actually put pen to paper on that. And then in the episode following that, we will do the rest of the chapter mapping process, and I'll walk you through why each part of that is so important in setting you up for success as a guiding North Star that you continue to refer to throughout the writing process. And it's so important to having a cohesive, well flowing, well put together book. I cannot stress it enough. So, as always, thank you so much for joining me on episode 42 of the Smart Publishing Impact series. If you have not reached out to me and, followed me on Facebook yet, please, check me out on Facebook. Look me up, Renée Lautermilch, Lautermilch. I'm the only one in the world. So when you search me on Facebook, I'm the only one who's going to show up. Shoot me a friend request. As always, if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to help. I love it when people drop in my DMs. So feel free to drop in my DMs. You can also find me on smartpublishingservices.com. And if you want an excellent guidebook that really helps you through the writing process, all the way up through post-launch marketing, grab my book, The 1 Hour Author, A Simple Guide to Writing and Publishing on a Busy Schedule. It's on both Audible and it's on the paperback, hardcover, and Kindle formats on Amazon. So really easy to go snag a copy, and the Kindle's like really cheap. I keep it really cheap, so if you got some spare pocket change, you can afford it. All right, so until next time, as I always say, keep writing your story because the world needs your voice. Take care now.